Hi, I'm just making this video which is a comment. I'm sharing a comment and some further clarification on the comment which is in response to this YouTube video, Empire Files, Peter Joseph and Abby Martin on abolishing capitalism. Peter Joseph is the founder of the Zeitgeist movement, a grassroots worldwide organisation that advocates an alternative economic system based on sustainability, cooperation and human need. His most recent book, The New Human Rights Movement, delivers a startling expose about the violent oppression that defines our economic order, while issuing an urgent call for global activism to unite and replace it. Abby Martin sits down with Joseph to talk about the contradictions and crises of capitalism and what he advocates to save the future of the planet from catastrophe. And it's by way of hopefully assisting people like Peter Joseph and the general public, and also Abby Martin, that I've posted this comment here, and I'm sharing it now publicly through YouTube, and I hope it somehow does reach Peter Joseph. I mean, he might have already reached these conclusions himself, though that didn't become very clear in this video. But I've written, capitalism is a natural aspect of life. Life capitalises on life, in the sense of producing a surplus to cover for leaner times. However, this kind of capitalism is quite different from usury, which enslaves life through debt and interest in both debt and slaves to control. A lawful capitalist stroke business owner pays the workers a fair wage to support a dignified standard of living, and saves a surplus to cover for leaner years or upgrades in equipment, etc. The workforce can thus rely on long-term employment, sick pay and pension. The lawless capitalist stroke usurer screws both workforce and business to grab as much cash as possible, pays a minimum wage providing a substandard living, workforce is thinned and eventually laid off, while business declares bankruptcy and owners run off to enjoy their offshore savings, or else they close the business in one land in order to re-establish that business in another, where low wages, ignorance of rights and or less taxes are tolerated. There were a few lawful capitalists in Victorian Britain, i.e. Bourneville, the model village created by the Cadbury family, who built decent homes, schools, provided parks and healthcare for their workforce. Lawful capitalism operates with compassion stroke conscience. The fact that capitalism has been very heavily oppressed to the extent almost of extinction, the fact that lawful capitalism has been very heavily oppressed to the extent almost of extinction, is part of the reason it was so easy to convince the masses that capitalism is evil, and what we need to replace it is socialism in the form of state-controlled production under the banner of communism. One is described as right and the other as left. Thing is though, life is also naturally socialist too. Life socialises and operates communally with other life forms for both pleasure, health, and both individual and collective advantage. It's this division of our natural tendencies which is the true source of present-day dilemmas, and the sole reason freedom appears an unrealistic aspiration, because freedom from capitalism equals a vital aspect of life has gone, and freedom from socialism amounts to the same. We need both, and that can only happen when humanity gets intelligent enough to collectively opt for universal law of abundance and compassion, which upholds our human rights plus animal and earth rights. Usury is effectively prohibited simply because rights are lawfully required to be respected, and there we find freedom equals respect for the law, and then we live with balance and without being forced into one world order, because balance of law and our adherence to it supports the natural diversity that is a prime feature of the human species. Universal law is for the benefit of all life on earth. Usury's law is providing profit and power to 1%, and ultimately that's what they will reduce life on Earth to, if we allow it, by failing to wake up to the left-right political con. Even a bird needs 2 wings to fly. We'll never get off the ground consciousness-wise while ever we continue to vote for one wing or the other. It's really crazy. So now I'm going to clarify some of the points that I've made here, and I'll start with the last point, which was, you know, a bird needs 2 wings to fly. And it is really crazy to be in the situation that we are, where we're being asked to choose which hand we'd like to keep. Do we want our left hand or do we want our right hand? And the point is that if we lose either one of our hands, then we are going to be crippled, aren't we? We're going to be disabled. And that's what division, that's the whole point of these things. That's why the divides, the usurers, like these divides. Because it cripples humanity, it cripples our power, it cripples the people. And the first division was with the sexes, wasn't it? You know, explain to the man that the woman's weak, and actually she was made by God to be weak. That's why she's got all this compassion and feelings and emotions and whatever. Why she won't just go out, starve, you know, she can't bear to watch people starve or suffer. This is all feminine, these things are all feminine, you see. It's just purely women that have compassion. Men, males, they don't have compassion. A real man, a strong and powerful man, who will have might enough to do as he wills, he can cut compassion out of his heart. He can bury it. He's got no conscience. He's got a heart of stone. So this male is convinced that actually all his power is absolutely dependent on the woman having no power. Because if she gets power, then he's going to have less power. And then you understand why we reach even at a point today where a lot of women have a modicum of rights in this world, but the vast majority still have none. That every home's a war zone at some time or another, and some homes worse than others, because you've got this power struggle going on, and the woman is fundamentally depressed. It is a legacy of depression that's been going on for centuries. I mean, let's face it, what's it like for a brain, a consciousness, a human consciousness to be told from birth, look, you're sorry, you're weak, you're inferior, your emotions are all sign of your weakness, the fact that you menstruate is a curse from God, the fact that you feel pain in childbirth is a curse from God, and the man, he's got a right to do whatever he likes to you because he's bigger and stronger than you, and that's the way God made him. And then you see a man like Jesus comes along, treats women with respect as equals, as another side of man, because, you know, God created man. Let us create man in our own image, both male and female, to be like us and set them to tame the earth. That's God, male and female. So, you know, Jesus upholds, treats women like an equal. He shows compassion. He cares for the sick and the disabled and the children. He especially loves the children. He asks humanity to suffer the needs of the little children to reach Jesus. And that is exactly what the usurers stood against, and they stood against him as he was alive in his lifetime, and they're still standing against him today. Because the usurers don't live by compassion, they live by competition. They've replaced compassion with competition. Compassion is a stumbling block. They've cast it out of human life. Of course, it's still in humans. The average human still feels it, but not the people who are controlling us. Compassion, our compassion, is a stumbling block for us. Because when you're running in a competition and one of your fellow competitors falls and you bend down to pick them up, well, you've wasted time, haven't you? And energy. Now you're not even anywhere near the front. In fact, you're right at the back. How's helping somebody? How's your compassion rewarded you? It hasn't. So that's the way the world conditions people's minds to operate in, on a level of what's selfishness and greed. How many more competitions can you win? How much further can you get ahead in it? How many people can you exploit? How many toes can you tread on? You see, the usurers will operate under the label capitalism and under the label socialism. And that's why, you know, I have my suspicions that Karl Marx was actually a shill, a form of controlled opposition, who was employed as soon as Britain had abolished slavery. Was it 1830 something that slavery was abolished in Britain? Well, that was a serious threat to the usurers of those days. They realised, like, oh my gosh, the Christian consciousness is rising up. So how do we address this? Well, let's define. Let's split the two natural human attributes, which is both to be capitalist and socialist. Let's split them apart, set them against each other, and when it comes to socialism, we'll just cut Jesus out. Because, you know, he wasn't a man. Because of his compassion and everything, of course he wasn't a man. He came directly from God, you see. That's why it's important to the usurers, still in the religions that they control, especially the so-called Christian religion of today. Still to this day, they cling to the Immaculate Conception. Because people have got to understand Jesus was not an ordinary man. He was the Son of God. He came directly from God. No other man can be like him. But that's not true. Because Jesus said, I am in every man. And Jesus said 78 times in the New Testament, so-called, I am the Son of Man. He called us all brother and sister. He taught us to pray to our Father. So let's listen to Jesus. Let's forget what the usurers' churches are telling us. The usurers' philosophy wants us to believe. Let's accept what Jesus said. Let's accept Jesus as he said, I am the Son of Man. Let's accept we are brothers and sisters. Let's accept that the universal intelligence that created us, it constitutes our Father when it comes to universal law. And universal law is very important because life isn't fair. Life is difficult. Life naturally poses problems. Life needs help. Our help. That's why we're here. As a grace, a saving grace for life. in times of catastrophe and disasters, we can help the life of this planet. We can save the life of this planet, like Noah did with his ark. Noah, who through his intuition, his connection to higher intelligence, was forewarned and took steps because he had faith in his thinking, in his understanding. So universal law is important because it brings a balance within the context of our human consciousness and being and the societies that we build on our planet. It delivers balance. It serves everybody, regardless of their faith, nationality, age, gender. Nobody's above universal law. Nobody's below it. It doesn't mean that some people are going to, that everybody's going to have exactly the same amount of wealth and live in exactly the same amount kind of houses. What it means is that everybody has a right to a dignified standard of living, a living that affords them respect, and that judgments against people that are then used to either oppress and or exploit those people, those cannot survive. And in a world governed by universal law, you see, the usurers feel every bit of as restricted as the majority of humanity feels living in their criminal system of rules for the competition that they say are laws. Suddenly they've got no freedom. Nobody's going to tolerate their insane ideas. People who aren't desperate for a bit of money just to survive aren't going to sell their children or abandon them. Life's not as much fun for that consciousness, that usurer consciousness that has stamped out compassion when people have their rights. You know, according to usurers, a child is a minor human being. Not important. According to universal law, a child is a VIP. A child has a right to acceptance, tolerance, forgiveness. Our children aren't getting these things. They're not even getting a basic understanding of what a child is and what a child needs. And they're growing up damaged, and they're raising future damaged generations. And deprivation breeds depravity to the point where suddenly we're witnessing symptoms of a social disease, like a psychosexual disease, that more and more men, vast numbers of them, it appears, just want to have sex with children or underage girls. And then all of a sudden, you know, you've got Cambridge professors saying it's normal, you know, paedophilia is just normal. Well, you know, perhaps the people of centuries ago thought that the bubonic plague was normal as well. The thing is that a lot of crimes can happen in an abnormal world. Now the other thing is that when you've got people who, for centuries, you've got a species, like humanity, it's intelligent, emotional, is for centuries and centuries the vast majority are being passed on this legacy of oppression and grief and suffering and deprivation, and life is hard and people really aren't enjoying themselves. It's just work, work, work. They don't even get any chance to spend with the children. Well, in that kind of consciousness, you know, you're going to, there's going to be hate, there's going to be anger, there's going to be despair, aggression. You know, I mean, we've witnessed the aggression against women really is off the scales, isn't it? And is it any wonder when, you know, basically the woman embodies everything that a man has been taught by this world to despise in himself. And he doesn't even realise that he's actually weakened by the fact that his partner is weakened. He doesn't understand because he's been so brainwashed, and so has the woman, that, you know, their strength, our human strength, fundamentally pivots on the strength, the bond between male and female, between the understanding that both are equal, both have a correct concept of each other, and they work together in harmony. That's the yin and yang. Then we are whole. But split the yin and yang apart and leave both sides with no concept of each other, and then say, right, you've got to work together somehow to produce the next generation. Oh my gosh, you know, this is, and then exactly that is the kind of consciousness that will accept this split between capitalism and socialism, capitalism, socialism, and then you've got all the in-betweeners, haven't you? Well, I'm a bit capitalist, I'm mostly capitalist, but I'm a bit socialist, or I'm a bit socialist, but I'm like mostly capitalist, you know. I mean, it just doesn't, you know, once they've got these divisions there, they play with them. They play with them. We need to understand that these people have been you know, they make the plans well into the future. When you've got 8 people owning the same wealth as 3.5 billion, that's serious, deadly imbalance. The universe doesn't operate on imbalance. It's imbalance created through luxury and abundance for the 1% and austerity and deprivation for the 99%. But the universe operates on a system of abundance, not austerity. There would be no universe if it operated on austerity. And that's exactly what's going to happen to life on our planet if we continue to allow these usurers the freedoms that they have. And as I say, the only way to combat the usurers, their power, is to stand up for our rights and to establish universal law and to recognise Jesus not as a figure in a church sent down by God, because we were all placed here by God, weren't we, the universe, but as a living human being who's human the same as us, who lives through us as we live through each other. Then we understand the importance. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why Islam's being heavily oppressed now with this antiquated version of Islam. But again, you've got a minority of people that have been funded and trained by the usurers in order to serve primarily their interests. And, you know, it's perfectly plain to see what's been going on. The vast majority of people ISIS have been oppressing are Muslims. moderate Muslims, Muslims who otherwise would and were in the past, did in the past, stand up for what, you know, Marx called socialism. But in the hands of usurers, you see, if socialism ever does get into power, well, you know, you're just going to have state usury, aren't you? Because they both amount to the same thing in usurers' hands. Either you're going to have state usury, state-controlled usury, and the whole workforce is a slave to it, or you're going to have corporate-controlled usury, which amounts to the same thing, except it's global, and the global corporation is basically controlling every country for the same purpose of usury. And a lot of people, I know in a lot of countries that, you know, there's people would be saying, oh no, you can't have universal law, you know, you couldn't expect every country, every faith to incorporate universal law. That'd be just like having the New World Order. What's the difference between that and the New World Order? Well, there's a big difference, because as I've explained in this comment, universal law supports our natural way of being. It supports our diversity, because that's a prime feature of our species, that we are a diverse species. And the whole point that, well, the point I want to make here now is that just in the way that every society, every culture, every faith has incorporated the usurers' competition rules as law, and their financial rules, their money, they've all had no trouble incorporating that. Well, all that's required is for them to reject that and replace it with universal law and its money supply. Because, you know, society needs that now. We can't just get rid of it and say, right, yeah, you can all operate on barter. No, that's cruel. That's like keeping an animal in a cage and then just for most of its life, and then just setting it out in the wild, expecting it to go and feed itself. You know, that's something that we can move towards as our consciousness has grown accustomed to living with the law. It will be a new thing for our generation, but for future generations it will be normal, perfectly natural, to the point where people will be saying, well, what do we need money for anyway? You know. And there's ways of going forward, you know, there's positive things that we can do. One of the things that we can do is ask questions of people in power. Don't be afraid to ask questions like, what's happening with children? Ask what's happened to God's half of the money. Hold them to their words, okay? Hold them to their words, just as we get held to our words. Anything you say shall be taken down in evidence, shall be written down and used in evidence against you. Well, we're not using words in evidence against, we're using words in evidence for our rights. Now, Jesus, apparently, don't forget, all our Western countries are all mostly Christian. According to Jesus, half the money belongs to God. So, where's God's half of the money? If Christianity, user-controlled Christianity, can use Jesus and God to take away women's rights, denigrate children as minors born in original sin needing a good beating every bloody day, judge black people as having no souls, so therefore they can be used as slaves, plus support usury in countless horrible wars. If they can use Jesus and God, from the words in the Bible, to do all of that, then we can use that, we can turn to that Bible as well and say, well, what about this then? So where is God's half of the money? What does God need money for, if not to establish universal law that is a beneficence, providing unconditional love for all the life on our planet? Who has got a right to say, oh no, we can just ignore that bit? Well, what, we couldn't ignore the bit about where you persecute women or you enslave people? Your justifications, your biblical text. Jesus said very clearly, half the money belongs to God. So like I say, God, the universe doesn't need money off planet Earth to go and buy another star, does it? The universe only needs money to make life better for the life of Earth. And the only way to do that is by establishing the law, as Jesus upheld. Jesus, a human being, intelligent, obviously connected to higher intelligence. I have absolute faith in him because I know, I have witnessed a universal golden light being. I have experienced the energy of bliss that informed me of universal law, that explained to me this is what this law is for, so everybody lives with a level of joy. A level of joy. Life on this planet hasn't, human life has not yet really fully achieved. The rich think they're happy, a lot of them, and according to them, they're experiencing what poor people would today recognise as joy because we're that conditioned. But their joy is in causing harm and profiting from it. True joy is about living lawfully and not feeling proud of yourself, but feeling satisfied. Feeling satisfied with life. And I think a key point that we need to remember as well is, the advances in quantum energy that tell us, we are eternal light beings. And that puts a whole slant then on Jesus talking about the afterlife. What are we investing in the afterlife? Think about what you're doing today, investing in the afterlife. Well, supposing he meant that our next lives on this planet, well, those 80 people who control 3.5 billion people's wealth, who have the same wealth, they're going. It's not a very nice world to be thinking of coming back to, is it? Where the majority of life is poor and have been judged cattle, animals. Because the people that have judged people, animals, have done that because they judge animals as, dumb creatures there just for them to control. And then, they apply that same thing onto the rest, onto humanity as well. We're just dumb animals for them to control. But we're not dumb animals. And animals aren't dumb either. So these people live in a very twisted version of life reality. And they are dangerous to leave, if we leave these in power. We cannot entrust the future of our planet and species in their hands. We just can't. We can't do it unless we're really, really stupid and we really don't care a toss for the next generation. And we don't care about our planet. So, there's lots of solutions. There's Ubuntu, Michael Tellinger, there's Mr. Ronald Bernard's Bank of Joy, there's Ken O'Keefe's One World Citizen Solution, there's the Lawful Bank in England. I mean, there's so many projects. We can get together, set up our own community farms, or set up our own community eco power stations. All it takes is people to invest. You know, go around your local community. How many people? How much do you spend on the lottery? What could you contribute? Instead of buying it to the lottery, could you contribute to setting up polytunnels on bits of spare land around the community, or establishing your own eco power station, or whatever? Have you got anything to invest in a lawful bank? Those are the proactive things that we can do. And then there's also the other things, like demanding child protection directives. Paedophile's nightmare there. Horror to sadists. Stand up for your human rights. Refuse to pay the criminal debt. Demand that it is erased. Demand that the banks are abolished and replaced with lawful banks that give us a money supply that allow us to live with abundance and our compassion, and that give us jobs that are rewarding and valuable and that are contributing to the future. Because usurers, they don't just steal from the present, they steal from the past. They have their power on wealth they've stolen from the past, they steal from the present, and they've also stolen from the future. They've stolen from the future to the degree that they've said austerity forever and the debt is unrepayable. And they want every generation hereafter to be working as slaves to pay that debt, to pay the interest of the debt off. It's impossible, and we just can't do it. It just cannot be done. And, you know, we need to turn our attentions away from the divisions. You know, the social scapegoats they've set up for us to channel the energy of our hate and anger onto, you know, the Jewish scapegoat, the Muslim scapegoat, the black scapegoat, the white scapegoat, where they convince us that, you know, they take a few criminals, because, you know, our society is full of criminals. We've been living in a criminal world, so you take a few criminals, psychopaths, sadists out of every little group, hold them under your media spotlight, say, look, this is Muslims, look, this is Jews, look, this is Christians, look, this is socialism, look, these are capitalists. Which scapegoat most appeals to your levels of hate and anger? It's time to wake up. Stop playing the games. It's all mind games. Get real. The problem is usurers and usury. That's the problem. They need bringing to justice. We need the law. We need our human rights. We need our child protection directives. We need sense, sanity, compassion, understanding. We need to take everything into account. And if we fail to do these things, we're not an intelligent species, we're a stupid species, and because of our stupidity, we will, exactly as Peter Joseph has said there, end up facing absolute catastrophe. The 1% that are left will probably end up even cannibalising each other. We're talking extinction. As ye give, so shall ye receive. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. That's the truth. That's the truth. What are we sowing here? What are our children going to reap? What are their children going to reap? We need to, as I say, capitalism and socialism need to work together, as was tried in Britain, you know, just after the war, but unfortunately very heavily oppressed right from the start by the usurers. It was against their wishes, and they whittled and whittled away at it till the point, you know, apparently the welfare state in Britain, it was just a social experiment. It didn't work, it failed. Yeah. So, you know, thank you for taking time to listen. And I hope it's helped put certain things into place, and that people feel empowered, because that's what knowledge and understanding clarity is meant to do. It's meant to empower people and to enthuse people with a new understanding, because we're on the cusp now of being born into our universal beings. You see, to become universally intelligent, because that's our choice. We need to make our own choice. God isn't going to, or the universe isn't going to come and impose universal law on us. We are offered it. It needs to be our own choice, because the universe doesn't operate on usury and slavery. You see. Now, at the moment, people are living under this spell of biblical prophecies, because apparently we've got to fulfill these horrific prophecies and destroy most of our planet until eventually the planet's completely destroyed. That's apparently what we've got to do, because God has said, God has prophesied. But no, the prophecies are a warning. The universe gave us free will. What's the point of giving a species free will and then saying, here you are, this is what's going to happen, this is what you're going to do, this is what's going to happen? No. We're not meant to fulfil the prophecies. We're meant to heed the warnings of what happens when we live lawlessly. It's time to get lawful. It's time to get real. It's time to shine with the light that we were born with, and that Jesus shone so brilliantly in his lifetime. He's still shining to this very day.